I'm Linda Johnson with the Northwest Indiana Storytellers Guild. I want to tell you a story today about Mrs. Maundrey. We're in this beautiful place and it reminded me of Mrs. Maundrey. Now I know that some of you out there know Mrs. Maundrey. You remember Mrs. Maundrey. A lot of people know Mrs. Maundrey, and there's one of my favorite stories about her, and I know some of you might remember this story too. You know, Mrs. Maundrey, she lived by herself on her little farm. Well, not all by herself. She had a little dog. She loved that little dog. That little dog went with her everywhere. Now, some of you that know Mrs. Maundrey know that she doesn't drive. So she has to take the bus into town when she needs things. But she can't take that dog on the bus. Oh, she really wanted to take that dog on the bus with her to town, and she thought and thought about what she might do, and finally she had an idea. She put on a long coat and she hid her little dog inside that coat, and she got on the bus and she went back toward the back of the bus and took a seat, and she arranged her little dog on her lap. Oh, this was wonderful. Here she was going to town, and she had her little dog with her. But then she began to smell something. Ugh, it was a terrible smell, and she looked behind her. There was a man smoking a cigar. Ugh. Well, that smell just got worse and worse. And finally, she just stood up and she turned around and she took that cigar right out of that man's mouth and she threw it out the window, and she said to the man, "Don't you know cigars are not allowed on the bus?" Well, she sat back down. But that man was mad, and he stood up and he saw Mrs. Maundrey's dog sitting in her lap. And he said to her, "Ma'am, don't you know that dogs are not allowed on the bus?" And he reached down and he picked up Mrs. Maundrey's little dog, and he threw that dog, he threw that dog out the, he threw that dog, somebody.
Out the window? The window.
Yeah, out the window, yes, out the window, very good. Threw that dog out the window. Oh, Mrs. Maundrey was so upset, she started to cry. And then she saw that they had reached town. So she got up and she got off the bus and she looked all around for somebody to help her. And then she saw running down the street toward her, why, it was her little dog. It was her little dog. And you wouldn't believe this, but hanging out of his mouth, sticking right out of his mouth was
a cigar?
No, dogs
not
don't.
A cigar?
Dogs don't smoke cigars. It was his tongue. I mean, it just seemed really long for such a little dog. Well, the next week, Mrs. Maundrey didn't want to take the bus again, so she decided she would walk to town. So she got all dressed up in her pretty dress, and she put on her pretty pink pearls, and then she put her dog on a leash, and they started walking to town. And they came to the bridge over the river, and she stopped to look over the bridge just to see how high the water was, and she heard something fall into the river, and oh my goodness, you won't believe what fell into the river. It was...
Her dog?
No, it wasn't her dog. It was,
Her, what was it?
it was her pretty pink pearls. Oh, Mrs. Maundrey was so upset. She decided not to go to town after all. She decided to go fishing. So she went home and she changed her clothes and she got her fishing pole, and she and her little dog headed back down to the river. And Mrs. Maundrey put the fishing line in, and right away, you would not believe what she caught. Why, it was
a boot?
It wasn't a boot.
Pearls? Her pearls?
It wasn't her pearls. It was
a fish.
It was a fish. It was a big fish. It was the biggest fish.